Machine.
Hi, it's Claire here, and welcome to Hot Pod Time Machine. This is the podcast where we talk about a decision from our past which changed our future. And in this episode, I'm very happy to welcome, it's Ben Starr. Hello, Ben. Lovely to see
Hello.
you.
Lovely to see you.
So, full disclosure, Ben's just come from a party, but he's looking well.
Thank you. That's so nice. We were actually outside, and it was pouring with rain, and we got like a little like gazebo that this person hadn't used since lockdown, and we pulled it out, and it was so British because it was pouring with rain, yet we were still eating our lunch outside. We could have gone inside, but we chose to just still sit with the pouring rain next to us.
What is it about the British spirit that just has us going, you know what, regardless, we will sit outside in the rain? Why do we do it to ourselves, Ben?
I don't think it's a spirit. I think it's just a stubbornness. It's like a refusal to change. You know, like these are the old ways. I've decided that it was going to be outdoors, so it's going to be outdoors. We're going to be miserable whilst we do it. And we couldn't hear each other. The volume of the rain was so loud. We couldn't hear a single thing, but we were still going, yeah,
Yes.
great.
Because we're also polite. I'm having a great time. This is wonderful.
This is exactly what I wanted to do with my day.
Well, are you, like when I was younger, I was like, I hate the sun. I only like the rain and I only like the darkness. But now I'm like, I want to be a hot dog. I want to be Hulk Hogan in the 80s, hot dog skin.
Yeah.
Are you like that?
I hate the rain. I hate the rain. I absolutely hate it. I don't hate it. I hate it when it catches me unawares. You know, when it's like I'm out and about, I've got business to attend to, whatever business that is. And I'm just doing business, you know, just
love
with a
that.
briefcase. And
It's like Ben just says to his partner, I'm just going out. What are you doing? Just got business to attend to.
yeah,
Ben
nothing
business.
it makes it sound so dodgy. What are you doing? Just business. Like, that sounds like black market stuff, Ben. That's what it sounds like.
Let's call it Ben business. It's Ben business.
Exactly. Nothing like a bit of alliteration to hide the fact that what I'm doing sounds illegal.
Totally wholesome, you guys. Hashtag wholesome.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I'm a very wholesome guy, and I just don't like being rained on when I don't expect it. I carry an umbrella with me at all points.
I feel exactly the same. Well, coming from Scotland, I've lived in London for 20 years, and one of the best things about living in London has been it's drier than Scotland. I can say that much. Scotland has this sort of fine rain, which sort of, it doesn't feel like you're getting wet, but within about 10 minutes, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty wet. I'm pretty soaked up.
Oh, it's like sprinkler rain. Where
Yeah.
you just don't notice it. You know, it's like spraying you. Yeah.
God, I hate it. God, how British are we? We spent the first couple of minutes just talking about the weather on a podcast.
I have about 5 other anecdotes lined up just in case we're still going down this road. Don't worry about it.
I love it. Well, let's get to the point of the podcast. Obviously, it's about a decision from your past which changed your future. But before I ask you what you're going to talk about and the actual decision, let's think about it for a moment. We make decisions every day, like micro decisions and macro decisions. So when I asked you just before this podcast started and you were like, oh no, I need 10 seconds, I need 30 seconds.
Yeah.
What were the kinds of decisions going through your head before you have arrived at the actual one?
I was thinking of those moments that are absolutely the moments where you can noticeably see the change in your life. That you go, that I could see I would almost be a completely different person if I hadn't made that choice. And it's really difficult, isn't it? When you went, have you thought about it? I went, no, I haven't. And then it did only take me 10 seconds really to think about it. I mean, you did count down in a very dramatic way, but when I thought about it, I went, there is one that I think about all the time that has really defined me as a person. And I just see how different I could have been if I took this other path. And it is a thing I think about regularly, and how lucky I feel. I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, there is. But when you're a freelancer, you are making choices all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't realize it, but it's like, it's not like I'm in a job that is the same job. It's, are you going to go for this audition? Are you going to make this choice in this audition that could completely change the course of your life forever?
Yes.
And I'm constantly greeted with very obvious I don't know what you'd call them, like changing moments, the sliding doors moments I'm presented with quite obviously all the time. So yeah, it's an interesting job to be a part of, and thinking one small decision can change my life forever.
I know, feeling that. And there's things that, I mean, there's times where I look back and I think I've made decisions on things, emails or calls or whatever, answering or not answering something. And then I think back and I go, would it have been better or different if I hadn't or had done that? And that it drives me a little bit nuts
Hmm.
sometimes. But are you quite a decisive person in general, would you say?
I I wouldn't say I'm particularly decisive, but I would say that when I make a choice, I actively choose to not regret that choice. So I I am a person who is very interested in the idea of fate and free will, and that kind of like strange coalescence between the two. Um, and but if I ever make a choice that I think's going badly, I go, well, that's the choice you made, Ben. Don't think about what could have been
Yeah.
in that way. He says after having just said he thinks about the other life that he could have had. Um, but I try not to, especially if it kind of ends up being like a negative thing. I try and just be a positive. I'm the kind of person that, like, if I'm vomiting in the toilet, I'll always be like, this is going to be a great story afterwards. Like trying to turn a really awful thing into a positive thing.
That's a good thing, though, I think. I'm kind of similar in that way. There's times with work where I've gone, slightly regretful, maybe I shouldn't have said this or whatever. But generally speaking, 95% of the time, I'm like, you know what? Done it. It's my life
Mm,
choice. Gone there, and wherever the chips fall, we'll deal with it then, kind of thing. And this is the only way to be, because you could go mad.
yeah.
You could go
I, be-
absolutely mad.
I do understand why people do it, though, because it is, as much as I can sit here being like, that's how I try to live. Obviously, half the time I'm a nervous wreck and I regret all the decisions I've made. But
No.
you have to. I think you have to actively make those choices. It's a difficult thing to not think about what could have been. But I really, really try and live my life in a way that goes, celebrate what you have. I'm also a big fan of celebrating small things. I'm probably infuriating, like if one small thing goes right, I'm like, way. Um, because I think it's nice to be silly, and it's nice to kind of celebrate small stuff, even if it isn't going to have a massive impact on your life.
I love that. I'm like that too. And I'm like that with my friends. If something small happens to them, I'll get them a card, or I'll be like, oh my God, that's so cool. Or
Yeah.
because it's nice to be supportive, and again, life is full of boring crap, like paying
Hmm.
your rent, paying your bills, waking up and just existing can sometimes be tiring. So it's good to
Hmm.
go, yay, we did a thing today. That's really
Yeah.
great.
Well, as a self-employed person, and certainly as an actor, you spend a lot of your time not acting. And so one thing I've been doing it my entire career, is one thing a day. Make sure you do one thing, whatever that thing is,
Oh,
and you celebrate that one thing, and then you feel like it wasn't a wasted day. And that one thing can be tiny, even around the house. It can be a menial job around the house. It can be cleaning something, putting something away. It might be going to the gym, going to the shops, something. But give yourself an activity to do, and then you feel like you are better off than you were before. And that probably sounds so silly, but I think in a psychological way, it is so important to feeling like even when you're standing still, you're moving forward.
yes,
Um,
I
and
completely
I
agree.
really try and live by that properly.
No, I completely agree. Well, I'm someone who seems to have like the most chaotic, busy daily life, so I'm kind of actively trying to not do so many things in the day, but it's
Great.
impossible. It's impossible, Ben. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
trying really hard because I'm moving to LA and all these things, so I'm like constantly like at the moment like, what do I need to do next? What do I need to do next? Because I
Mm.
feel like sometimes my life will crumble into a little ball of sand if I don't,
Yeah.
I've got just it's high stress. But I'm going to go back to that idea in a second. I do want to know about your decision. So
Yes.
just before this podcast started, literally you decided. So what is the decision from your past which changed your future?
It was one moment. I think about this all the time.
Okay.
And it's probably very a lot of people who are watching this have probably experienced it as well. It's the moment that you choose, this can sound silly, that you choose which university to go to. And some people have an idea of what university they're going to go to, and they've had it planned their entire life, and they know where they're going to, and they planned it and they've applied. Well, I'd already got my results. I was applying on my gap year to go, and I had a choice between about 5 universities to go to. And I really wanted to go to one, which was University College in London, because I thought, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to do that. That's where I'm going to go. I'm going to get an agent when I'm there, and I'm just going to go and study. And then for some reason, I went up to accept UCL. And for some reason, when I was in my sister's room, which is where the computer was, I went, no, I'm going to go to Durham instead. I'm going to go to a different university. And I just clicked accept on a different university. I went, that's where I want to go to. That's quite cool. I'm going to go there instead, because I want to do sport. I want to do sport stuff, because I did lots of sport at school. I was like, that's what I want to do. So I just clicked on Durham and I accepted Durham. And I had probably the best 3 years of my life there, not because, I got pissed and partied, but because I did so much extracurricular theatre. I met my best friends. I met people who molded me into the person that I am today at that place. And had I not gone there, had I not met these people who are still the most important people in my life, I'd be a completely different person. And it was all because one decision. I could have gone up the next night and just accepted UCL, but there was just something inside of me that compelled me to click this button and say, accept. And it's one click. It's like, boom, there. And I went, what? And I didn't think about it at the time. But now I was out with, all of my friends who I made at Durham have gone into the arts, and they're doing amazing, amazing stuff. And we all helped each other, I think, be better people, but also kind of be better artists as well, because we were all doing like English and history, but there is no drama degree, but we all just kind of like didn't do any of that. And we just did theatre, and we produced shows, and we toured America, and we did all this crazy, crazy stuff because we were so passionate about it. And so many of them have gone into the arts, and they are my great, 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 great friends. They're my friends for life. They're the people that I would be there for at their lowest moment. And that's it. It's that one click that changed my life.
Interesting so I'm thinking about that one click that you made, because it feels like to me, as you're telling the story, that because you had this clear idea, I'm going to London, that's where you go, that's what you do to be an actor, fine, but your instinct took over somehow. Do you feel it was intuition that kind of, or maybe even if it's for a flash moment, if you really think about it, that made you go, I don't know why, it was just pure instinct, do you think?
It was completely instinct, but also it was for the reasons that I ended up not fulfilling, which is I wanted to go and do sport, which I didn't end up doing any of. I didn't play. I basically stopped playing sport, and I don't regret it. Like I got to do so much theatre, but I didn't realize what a community it was there. And it was for a completely different reason is the reason why I have now gone into this job. And I wouldn't be the actor that I am today. I wouldn't have gone to the drama school that I went to. I wouldn't be here talking to you. I would have had the chaos theory argument. I would have gone in a completely different direction. Maybe I would have been more successful. Maybe I would have been in a completely different job. But life is always about collisions. All these moments where you are constantly bouncing off each other and meeting people that change your life. And I never would have met the people who allowed my life to collide in such a way that I'm here now talking to you. I'm here kind of celebrating some amazing, cool things that are going on in my life. And that is all because of many other things, many other collisions. But like, I think about that one click all the time.
You mentioned the people, your friends, several times now, and the people that you met then. I think we don't give the people in our life credit enough, because they change us. It's not just about decisions that we make, but it's about decisions in friendships and romantic partners, even family members, and who we choose to spend time with through the years as well. Like you mentioned that they made you who you were as well. I mean, like, talk about your friends for a moment then. Like, when you say, oh, they really made me as well, like, in what way? Was it this just the support? Was it because you learned something from them? What was that?
At Durham University, around the time that I went, there was this kind of culture of doing extracurricular theatre. And the Durham is a collegiate system. There's a joke that Durham's a bit like Oxbridge rejects, where people go because they want to be part of that collegiate system. And you get assigned to a college, and I went to Castle, which is literally in Durham Castle. It's where we would live. And there was this real sense of it being like, we're Castle. We drink our mead and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And as lovely as everyone was, I didn't really find my people there. I found my people in like the theatre scene, which we had like a little university theatre, but it was all just like, you've got to do it off your own back. You go to university, you find out who you really are because you make the effort to sign up to the groups and join up. And I just met this group of people, particularly in my second year, who were willing to just do things that were maybe beyond us, to take risks. And this, in any creative endeavor, you see the worst of yourself. You are the worst of yourself as well as being the best of yourself, because you place yourself in such an emotionally vulnerable position. And I don't mean that in the sense of like you're pouring your heart out on stage, but I'm like, you're making theatre yourself. You are producing the shows, you're learning the lines, you're in a rehearsal room, you're making mistakes, you're standing up in front of hundreds of people, probably being quite bad at times. You need that support network, and you're with each other in really intense scenarios. And you spend so much time together that I just, these people through the furnace that was just us doing our degrees, but also just like learning these lines, being quite bad, being silly, and having that amazing mutual experiences that I still talk about today. We have created this amazing friendship, and whenever we get back together, they're still doing plays and on the West End and in films and being really successful, but we still talk about like the silly production of whatever Guys and Dolls that we did together, that was just so silly, but we had such a good time. So those people, I really, really love them, and they would be the people who would come to my wedding, come to my funeral, I reach out to when I'm really, really low. Sorry, I've just kind of really kind of gone off on
No.
this thing,
I,
but
l- I love it. I love how important that they were to you. I was thinking as you were talking about, because you've grown up together, essentially. You still know those people and you've seen them develop and grow. So I was thinking about young Ben versus the Ben that we see here now. Well, before you met them and as you entered Durham, and you made this decision, what kind of young man were you back then? And versus now, what kind of person are you today? I mean, there will be things that are still the same, Ben, and obviously things that are very different because we're older now. But so who were you back then if we were to meet you then?
Ben didn't know portion control. He didn't understand. He didn't understand the value of because I basically was teetotal before I went to university.
Okay.
And I started drinking on Freshers Week.
Of course.
And I didn't understand. I didn't understand what alcohol would do to my body. And also I am the class clown. I always have been. Like, I've been a very high achiever in lots of like academic ways and sporting ways and whatever, but ultimately like my role in the stereotype would be the idiot who makes other people laugh. That's always been my thing that I've liked. And so that and alcohol at the same time, that's like, look at Ben, look how drunk he is, or look how silly he's being and stuff. And I played the Joker a lot of the time.
Were you rather hyper as a young man?
If you met Ben as a kid, yes, Ben is the hyper kid. Because I wasn't like this would be a weird thing to say, but I wasn't like the cool, attractive guy in class who everyone really fancied. I was like the bit of the nerdy, weird kid who was like the best friend who made everyone laugh. And so that was my role. And I was so hyper. My parents would tell this story how like we were on holiday in Greece once, and I entertained the beach for half an hour just by running up and doing impressions of Jim Carrey for about half an hour. Like, I was obsessed To tell you what type of kid I was a kid who was obsessed with Ace Ventura and The Mask.
You and I would have been best friends, nerds, and really obsessed with Jim Carrey. Hello.
So obsessed, so like he is the reason that I wanted to be an actor, and not because he was, when people are like, "Who was your influence?" Daniel Day Lewis, like, no, Jim Carrey. What
Yes,
that
he's
man was
great.
doing in the '90s was mind blowing, and it, it's just I loved doing impressions of him and what he did, and yeah, Ace Ventura in The Mask. I just would
Oh my
always,
god.
always,
I was obsessed. So I went to see Ace Ventura in the cinema. My big cousin took me, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then when I came home, I would just like do impressions of Ace Ventura and run around the house. And my
hmm
mum was like, "Oh my god, I hate this movie already." And then when I saw The Mask, I got the soundtrack as well, and I played that soundtrack like constantly. And I quite fancied Jim Carrey in a weird way. I was like, "Who's my
yeah.
first crush almost?" Apart from Hunter and Trojan from Gladiators, it was Jim Carrey. I
Yeah,
was,
it's a great lineup. I think that's a dinner party right there. You've got that's a '90s dinner party to die for.
oh my god, yeah, Hunter, Trojan, Jim Carrey. I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah,
Extremely happy.
I think anyone would.
Oh my god, I've met Jet and I've interviewed Jet. And
Okay.
she was incredible. But I would love to interview Hunter and Trojan, I think. But I love
hmm
Jim Carrey. Oh my god! And when I
Yeah.
say that to people, they go, "Really?" But I think you're right. Like Jim Carrey in the '90s was absolutely incredible. Did you like Jim Carrey beyond his comedic roles when he started to do more serious things?
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, I've all seen I've seen the documentaries about Jim Carrey. I imagine he's a very difficult person to work with, but when you're looking at a body of work, that man is undeniably talented at what he did. I think he is such a practitioner of a very particular art form, bringing clowning in such an amazing way into the forefront. Like he was a clown, and he was the clown. He was my clown, um, and no one was doing what he was doing. And then he pivoted, and you've got like the Truman Show, which still is one of the greatest films of all time. We're still seeing it now. Barbie is basically the Truman Show of a film, like, and then Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You have these amazing dramatic performances by him, because of his understanding of clowning. And so you go from the happy clown to the sad clown. You go to the clown, the tragedy of the clown who can never achieve. And I think his career is that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like, yes, there are all the stories. What happens when you become the highest paid actor in Hollywood, and you probably become unbearable and believe your own hubris, and I imagine is quite troubled in some ways. But his output was so influential on me as a kid who
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand that or didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. All I knew was that he was someone who I could impersonate, and I could learn to stretch maybe beyond the boundaries of me as a normal child, and I could exercise that theatrical muscle, whether I knew I was doing it or not. Um, and when you're a kid, when you're an actor, all they ever tell you to do is be louder. They can't tell you the nuances of human emotion and trying to tap into some emotional core. It's like, maybe a bit louder, Ben. It's like, I never got that note because I've been copying Jim Carrey from when I was like 5 years old. It's like, maybe Ben a little bit quieter.
just I
Yeah.
wanted to ask actually a sort of creative question, I guess. So I'd say this, obviously we have our influences, whatever you end up doing, whether you're a musician or an actor or whatever. For me, growing up, my influences were I quite like quite loud music, angular music. But when I come to play music and write my own music, it's very sad and somber and very melodic. I can't seem to get anything out of myself beyond that. That's just maybe what it feels like in my heart. I don't know. I'm totally emo, like totally emo inside. But I wanted to ask the same for maybe acting. Perhaps you look at someone like Jim Carrey and you go, oh my God,
Yeah.
incredible. And perhaps you want to not emulate that, but like aspire to that as a young actor.
hmm
But maybe what comes out versus what you're aspiring to. Do you think that it's a similar thing to what I'm describing with music, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, I don't get to be that creative often with my output. Like I just have to say the lines that people tell me to say. And I have found that pretty much in my career, I've been serious, brooding people my entire career, which has been interesting because I am not that. Anyone who meets me, they'll be like, that's just not Ben. And, you know, like the role of Clive Rossfield in Final Fantasy XVI is not the clown. He is the brooding, emotional hero who goes through trauma that we have to overcome, and that sense of catharsis of that, like that's what that is. And I think that because maybe I get to clown a lot in my real life, in my in my art, I get to be a lot more serious and do stuff like that. But I would love to be stupid. I would love to be stupid. It's why I'm a bit stupid online really with Clive, because it's taking the stoicism of Clive Rossfield and turning it on its head, I think is quite silly. And
Yes.
I really enjoy that because I don't get to do it that much. And anyone who knows me like knows that I'm just the biggest idiot.
Yeah.
Just the biggest. When we first met, it was like I think we bonded over just being massive idiots. Because it's fun and it's silly, and I love the kind of the levity of that. But in the
Yeah.
work, I also do love exploring darkness. I love getting to the emotional core of characters. I love to figure out why they tick and why they do certain things. And I think that is also a fun thing to do because it's not something that I necessarily examine on a day-to-day basis within myself.
I always thought, when I was younger, I always thought of the light parts and the dark parts inside of us as separate in a way. But as I get older, I realize that the lightness and the darkness can coexist. They're not mutually exclusive. And it's now I'm trying to find within my own creativity how to bring those together. I can bring it together maybe in my music sometimes if I'm writing music, but in the other things I do when I'm being weird and I'm wearing a cat mask and being Tarot Cat and or whatever, like you haven't seen Tarot Cat yet. I'll send you that later.
Please show me Tarot Cat.
I'm looking at Tarot Cat right now. It's just like he's staring at me right now.
Right.
Let me just get him down for the context of the podcast. This is Tarot Cat.
Oh wow. Oh
yes,
wow.
Yeah, he's
what a beauty.
He's a cat from Brooklyn, who reads tarot cards. That's it.
It's the perfect creation.
Yeah. Yo, and that's it. I love it. I love it so much. So I think that there's a lightness and a darkness that can come together in my personal life. Anyway, would you say that as well? Because I've always felt, even though I'm silly and I was the clown as well at school, I had such a darkness inside me that I never really explored. Would you say the same?
Oh yeah, massively. I love we're getting into it right now. Yeah, 100%. Like I always think about humor and what you use humor for. I often find myself in a social situation being the peacemaker because I have the ability to maybe be a bit silly and find the funny in the moments of tragedy. But it's like sometimes what are we using that comedy for? Are we using that to accept the tragedy? Are we using to reflect on the tragedy? Or are we using it to deflect the tragedy? Are we using ourselves instead of going, here's a funny moment, let's allow ourselves to humorously re-examine it? Or is it going, actually, look over here and don't look at that and ignore it? So there's two ways that humor can go. And I have found myself thinking about the times in which I do that, to not accept the truth in front of me and to say, I'm going to park that and think about something else. Or do I do it to look back on something and be reflective and accept it and try and find it in a humorous way so that I can accept it as something? And we all have tragedy in our lives. And I've had a lot of horrible things happen to me in my life very recently. And like, basically my dad died. And it's like, I found myself falling into this just unbelievable depression. This just the worst thing that could have possibly ever happened to me. And humor felt wrong. I felt guilty for laughing. I felt guilty for finding joy in anything because he wasn't there. It felt like I was doing my dad's life a disservice by finding pleasure in anything. And it's so difficult because you think that's not what that person would have wanted. But it's often difficult when you are in such a deep depression to find happiness, because you feel bad. You feel bad for laughing, or being happy. And that's so difficult. That's so difficult. And so I would often, that's how I've started to re-examine my humor, being like, what is it used for? I remember the day that he died, and we all came back to the house. Like I found out at 8 a.m. He died at 3 a.m., I think, or something like that. And I don't live near. So my mum called me and I drove home. And it was just the most normal day. It was just the most normal day. And that was the worst thing, because life went on. Normality was there. And I remember being around my mum and dad's friends who'd come over to try and support us. And they try and be funny. They try and laugh, because they want to bring us out of that. But I'm going, don't do that. Don't do that. And they were just doing a wonderful thing, because how can you possibly understand what someone is going through in that scenario? And their attempts, often successful attempts, at trying to laugh. And I felt that, like, every time anyone tried to make me laugh, I wanted to strangle them. I wanted them to say, don't do that. And it taught me a lot, because going forward, whenever I've seen someone I've witnessed someone going through trauma that I personally don't understand, I now don't try and make light of it. I don't try and make a joke out of something, because actually I'm devaluing the thing that they're going through. I'm not saying this is universal. This is entirely my own experience.
Of course.
But finding humor as a way of, like, either deflecting or accepting is so interesting. And I found myself examining the way that I do it more now as a result of that.
Very interesting that you have reflected on that, especially with your dad's passing, because humor absolutely is a way, it can be, if done right, a way of processing. Perhaps not as immediate as your parents' friends were trying to do it. Maybe it wasn't done in the right way. It's like, hey,
so they were doing it fine.
Let's go, but obviously I think as well, it's their way of processing what's happening. And obviously in the moment you don't realize that, you're just going, oh my God, shut up. Like, please, like, I can't deal with this right now. But it's that way, when you were in school, for example, and maybe they would say something very serious and you'd want to laugh in the class. I had that a few times where something sad, bad, or whatever would happen, and I go, like, I didn't know why I was laughing. It's almost like your brain can't process it, so it's going to this other place, which is laugh,
Yeah.
because you're uncomfortable,
It's the breaking. You see you hear it in plays, or you see it in films, and it's really noticeable in a play. It's really noticeable in a play where something isn't funny, and there is this moment of tragedy, and then someone says a tiny thing, and it's not funny, but people laugh because it's the only thing that they can do to get out of the slump. And there's just something very funny about that, and the unexpected. It's a surprise. It's the equivalent of like a jump, but it'll come out as a laugh. And I don't want it to come across like I was slagging my parents' friends off when they came over.
No, not at all.
And when I had to write my dad's eulogy and give my dad's eulogy at the funeral, and I made sure that it wasn't a sad eulogy. It had to be a celebration of his life. So I did a very particular thing where I was like, I did the 5 cheeses of Christopher Starr, because he loved Trivial Pursuit. So I went around and went a bit like the categories of that,
Oh, I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was like, he was obsessed with Trivial Pursuit. And so I just was like, well, let's do the categories and talk about him as these categories, and each time we'll go around and collect a cheese about his life.
He would have bloody loved that.
Like... Yeah, I know. Listen, my magnum opus, just dead dad, but whatever, it's fine. Lovely speech. They got a lovely show out of it. But I was so aware that, like, in that moment, I wanted to bring at least some levity and joy to what otherwise would have been a very, very somber moment. And what I could bring was a bit of fun, I could bring a bit of fun to his life and reflect on who he is in a very humorous way. So that was another way in which I went, here's some humor. This is going to allow us to maybe understand what it is that we're going through.
It's a great
little bit more.
Great way to process. I tend to use humor to process after the fact. And I'm doing that a lot in my stand-up, because I split with my husband last year, and so I don't take the piss out of him on stage because that's cruel. But it's the moments that you go through instead, you know, like, and you're going, oh, that when it's happening, it's not funny, and then after you go, that's really fucking stupid, you know, or family or whatever, and it's a good way for me to process. But when something first happens to me, I don't know if you're the same. Maybe you sound quite similar from what you've said. I go dark, and I'm like, right, I just need to nobody speak, because my whole job is being like this all the time. Hey everyone, hi everyone, oh my god. And like when I was younger, I was like, I'm the class clown. I was a bit chubby and a bit nerdy, you know, and I was like, oh. So when something bad happens, I don't want to speak. I just want to play guitar or read a thing and be very quiet, very dark, and feel everything, like really feel it, like to the point it hurts, like I want to feel pain, and then I'm like, fine, it doesn't last for long, and then I'm like, I'm cool now, it's cool, I can get on.
Whenever like I don't get a role or something, or like if I've auditioned for something and I really wanted it, you know, and often you just do an audition and you just shout into the internet and nothing ever happens from it and you don't really care. But there are times where you do, and you do a couple of recalls or whatever, and you start essentially the equivalent of like spending the money, right? You're going, I can imagine my life doing this.
It's dangerous, Ben. It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's so dangerous, and you should never, ever, ever do it. But you can't help but fall into the trap where you start believing, because you're going, no, it won't happen. And then you get another recall. No, it won't happen.
I know.
And then you start thinking it might. And I am pretty good at not letting that happen. But every now and again you do. And when I don't get something like that, I allow myself an hour to be really sad about it. And I go, you are allowed to be really sad about this for an hour. And then you move on.
Yes. I like that.
Don't suppress it.
No.
Accept it. Listen to it. What's it telling you? What are the things that you're scared about? What are the things that you are that hurt you about this? What is the feeling that you're feeling? Allow it in. Take it all in. All the gross stuff. Accept it, and then go and experience it so fully for that hour, and then stop.
I like that.
And it's helped me so much with like rejection and failure and sadness, of kind of like looking at it directly in the eye and going, what is it that you're feeling?
Yes, eyeballing it, like properly. Yeah. I did that last week. Something happened. It was more of a personal thing that brought me back to this horrible place emotionally. And it was just 24 hours, but for 24 hours I didn't speak. And when I did speak or did a voice message to a friend, I went, I'm depressed and do not feel good right now, and I love you, but I'm sorry, you know. I was fine. Lay in bed, I let one tear run down my cheek, very efficient emoting. I was lying in bed Monday night last week, let one tear roll down the cheek, wiped it away, and went, no, I'm done. That's it, like, we're done here. Because I don't know, I do want to feel things, but at the same time, I've got a lot to do. You know, I've got to schedule in my depression here. Got to schedule that shit in. But you also do, because if you allow it to overtake you completely, that's when it just, there's no point then, you know? There's just
it's
no point.
It's going to keep getting in the way of all the stuff that you have to do. And it's like, what is the most effective way of me accepting this and moving on? It's hard. This career, the careers that we have chosen are so difficult because so much of it is out of our hands. And you can't help but maybe sometimes reflect back on yourself and you think, was it me though? Did I do everything that I could possibly do in that scenario to make sure that it maximizes the very small space that I had a choice over it? And you can't help but blame yourself when in fact it's got nothing to do with you. And then it's also the embarrassment of, like, if you've told friends that you're auditioning for something, they're like, how was that thing? That's a pride thing.
I know, that's more of a pride thing. Although I've learned to just go, oh, I just didn't get that thing, or the job fell through. I think my friends sort of know now, and most of my friends are like actors, comedians, like whatever. So we all kind of get it. But those who aren't, they kind of know. It's more my parents. You know, I don't tell my parents anything, because they will obsess over it. And my dad said to me, and I mentioned this in a podcast previous episode, my dad went, I wasn't getting a lot of work at some point earlier, at a point early in the year, and he went, "Can't you just send your CV to the BBC?" And I went, "I already freelance for the BBC, Dad." And he went, "Okay, good. Well, you've gotten in. Well, can't you just tell them you want to do the news or something?" And I was like, "No, it doesn't work like that. I don't want to be a newsreader. It doesn't. You need qualifications, Dad, for that." But they don't get it.
It happened so much for actors. I would say probably about 6 years ago, there was kind of probably an in-joke amongst all British actors, which is people just saying to them, "Couldn't you get on that Downton Abbey or that Game of Thrones? Why don't you just be? Why don't you want to be in that Downton Abbey? You'd be so good in that Downton Abbey or that Game of Thrones. Just ask." And it's as though like you're not trying.
Don't you want to be in that Downton Abbey? And my dad's going, "Don't you want to be in the news? Don't you want to be a newsreader?" I'm like, no, no, it's not that easy. But going back to the very start of the podcast, to wrap up, I wanted to ask you, you said do one thing every day, even if you can't be bothered doing anything. Okay. So for those out there listening who don't perhaps have the Ben Starr, the Ben business motivation that you have,
Yes.
what would you say if they went, "I don't know what to do in the day"? What would your advice be to them to get them out of their rut and moving forward?
To get someone out of their rut. Gosh, that is everyone's rut is so different, isn't it? It's mad. It's me saying what gets me out is it doesn't come easily. It really doesn't come easily. It's like a forcing of yourself to do it. I often use caffeine as a way of doing it.
It's not
I often
bad,
use coffee. I use coffee as the thing that gets me out. But it is kind of entirely up to you. No one is going to make you do anything that you don't want to do yourself. And I think maybe it's looking inward and thinking, just one thing. Sometimes it's difficult because I think maybe we want to be witnessed doing something. If someone doesn't witness what we do we do it? Hence why we go on social media. I did this. Is the sense of like, I'm alone in this. Does it matter if no one experiences this with me? It's the thing about, loneliness and not having someone. And I think that's difficult. So maybe if you are by yourself, finding ways of just like noting it and seeing changes, because if we don't feel like we're seeing changes, then what's the point? Because no one's experiencing that. And I think maybe finding someone to talk to, finding people to communicate with so you do feel progress. But if not, then writing stuff down.
Yes.
Lists are so important.
Oh, I love a list.
Even if you've already done it, write it, cross it off the list.
Love a list, Ben. Love a list. Love a bullet point list. All about that.
Super important.
So important. And finally, if you had to describe Ben business, what would Ben business entail? I'm interested.
Ben business. Ben business is me with a bowler hat and a briefcase, strolling through, twiddling a cane, listening to Ben business. Ben business is walking from. Sometimes, if I just want to do something, I will walk from Oxford Street to Leicester Square Tube. I will just do that. I will walk there and I will either make a phone call to someone who I haven't spoken to in a while. I will reach out to a human being who I felt like I haven't connected with, or I will answer some emails, or I will find a moment to walk through Soho in a diagonal direction. For those who don't know the geography of that is literally a diagonal straight line. It probably takes you about 15 minutes to do it, 20 minutes if you're just having a nice stroll. And that's what Ben business would probably be summed up with, is taking that 20 minutes or whatever it might be to communicate with someone or email someone or reach out to another human being and feel, like I said earlier, witnessed.
I
that's
love
probably
that.
what it would be.
I love Ben business. Ben will be starting his own holistic mindfulness business soon, you guys.
It's Ben Tours. It's a specific trip that I take you.
It's 15 minutes, just a diagonal line through Soho. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it.
it's really fun. But I'll make sure I have one of those, things that you can follow.
Charge
A
20,
little
30 quid
flag.
a minute. I think 20, 30 quid a minute. We'll see how it goes. I loved that, Ben. Thank you very much for chatting to me. I know we always start with a decision, and then I like the rambling chat. We got very deep for a second there as well, Ben.
I know, I know. Is that all right? Is that
We
okay that we
went
went
there.
deep? We'll edit it out. It'll just be like non-stop laughs.
I'll just, when
And
we get deep, I'll put like a smiley emoji face on you and just play some comedic music. That'll be.
yeah,
That's it.
some Benny Hill in the background just to kind of really liven it up.
Yeah, we'll just do that.
Yeah.
Ben, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting to you. For those who are watching on YouTube, all of Ben's links are in the description below. For those listening along on whatever platform, Spotify or whatever else, please make sure you subscribe and like and all that. My name is Claire. This has been Ben. This is Hot Pod Time Machine. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Hot Time Machine.